is Red Ice.
Welcome to Red Ice Creations Radio. My name is Henrik Palmgren and this is Internet Talk Radio, recorded from the west coast of Sweden. You'll find us online at redicecreations.com, where we have a new show for you every Thursday and Sunday, and our entire archive of regular shows is up there for free. And if you like the show, we have a lot more programs available for you in the subscriber section. So take a look at that. Thanks to Kent Daniel Bentkowski, who was with us last week talking about Stanley Kubrick's Eyes Wide Shut. Very good stuff. And for our subscribers, we dived deeper into the global elite. We also talked about the TV series 24 and about nukes going off in the US and much more. So check that out if you missed it. Today we have Alan Watt back with us for his monthly visit, and we'll begin to talk about the origins of socialism and communism, and we'll get into the occult aspects of this apparently atheistic political ideology. What is behind the hammer, the sickle and the star? Stay tuned, lots of good stuff coming up with Alan Watt. Welcome. Today we have researcher Alan Watt back with us on the line. Alan joins us the last Sunday of each month here on Red Ice Creations Radio, and we are very proud to have Alan with us. His website is cuttingthroughthematrix.com, where you can follow along with Alan's blurbs and very powerful audio commentary, and I suggest you do check out some of his books, his videos that he got available through his site. Alan is very knowledgeable about history, mythology, fraternal orders, secret societies, and all kinds of movements directing and guiding our world today. So again, with that, let me say welcome back to you, Alan, and thank you so much for taking the time to be here today.
It's a pleasure, yeah.
It's awesome to have you. I thought we could dive in today to kick things off, talking a little bit about socialism and communism. I heard one of your blurbs where you kind of went into a little bit about the symbology behind the Soviet flag and all of this, and maybe we can dive into that a little bit later on. But to get things going, I guess we could start at the official beginning to kind of unravel some of the knots that there. Do you think that Karl Marx, Friedrich Engels, are these guys the real founders of communism?
No. We know that Karl Marx was a hack journalist who was kicked out of Germany and brought into Britain to basically write the manifesto. He was so unimportant that for many years his name wasn't even attached to the first couple of editions. So he wasn't the main thrust. He was the person who was told what to put into writing, into a formula really, and a theory, the whole theory of dialectical materialism, and to make it into what seemed to be a science, and that was what it was meant to be. It was to rival existing religions by adopting the same sort of beliefs as religions run on. There was the inevitability of what they call progress and the rising of new forms, new ways of living from the lower classes' struggle, supposedly. And as the decadence into the middle and upper classes, then you'd always have this fresh input for a new direction coming from the workers, which was nice on paper but never happened in reality. So it was a pseudo-science which tied in heavily with the writings of Charles Darwin. It was based on the Superman type theory that through science, through the abandonment of all religions and simply using science, man would somehow fulfill a destiny, which shows you that there was a religious pull to the whole preaching of communism, that there was a destiny there to even fulfill. And that's when they wrote many books. You'll find that all the Freemasonic groups of the day were heavily involved in the revolutions, which predated Karl Marx. You can go back to the English Revolution. That was the first major turn where bankers financed Cromwell. to take over England and get what they call democracy on the go established. Second revolution was the American Revolution, and then of course that was followed by the French Revolution.
Yeah.
So Freemasonic literature, even today, openly declares that they have been behind every revolution for the last 500 years.
Regarding Cromwell, what time period are we talking about there?
You're looking into the 1600s.
Okay, yeah.
And Cromwell was financed by bankers from Amsterdam.
Yeah.
Who financed his army, the equipment, the armaments, and all of that kind of stuff to change England's system from the feudal society to the next step, which was a form of democracy, even though initially it was all for nobility, really. They swapped their feudal system and gave themselves a parliament, you might say.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I guess we could tie this into, I guess, William of Orange and the bank system coming out of the Netherlands, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was heavily involved. And as I say, to be on the go much earlier, you'll find that with even the writings of More with his Utopia. He wrote Utopia about the same time, or just before, Francis Bacon wrote his New Atlantis.
Yeah.
They're very, very similar because they were both Freemasonic writings or Rosicrucian writings. And they talked about a future world where everything would be in its place and everything would have its place, run on a form of science, with lawyers at the top as well, administering the justice to the people. But basically science would lead the way out of the darkness of religion.
Yeah.
So from the 1500s onwards, you might say, you can see the start of this. And by New Atlantis, they meant the Americas.
Yeah.
That's what they meant by the New Atlantis.
That's an interesting idea. I want to return to that a little bit later also maybe, but regarding the, I guess, revolutionary movements, one theme I guess is running throughout all of this is the tie-in with the Promethean character. Isn't this right? This, of course, is a statue that is, I guess, outside of the Rockefeller Plaza, or what is it, in New York there, where this is basically the god who stole the fire from the other gods, right?
That's right, fire from heaven.
Yeah.
Meaning intellect. And there's a good poem out there by Shelley on Prometheus, is well done. And Prometheus, again, in the later religions, became Satan. It's the same hidden meaning behind all the religions. In fact, they're all the same story. So Prometheus took light, intellect, to the world of darkness and gave it to man. Yeah.
So he's the rebel who defines the overlord, I guess.
Yes.
Yeah. and again, the revolutionary idea then is to kind of always rebel against the authority, to kind of, I guess that they see it in the way that they are trying to rearrange the current paradigm by actually having people rebel or go in revolution, I guess.
Yes.
Yeah.
The whole idea of the mystery religions is to bring order out of chaos.
Yeah.
And they perceive a world where everyone does their own thing as chaos, as chaotic. They want a world run by science, where science dictates to the people, and the people follow and do what they're told.
Yeah.
But this has been like that for at least 500 years. And we see it today where on all television programs across the globe, even on regular little newscasts, they always bring experts on to tell you what to do about this, that, or the other. You don't have to think for yourself because they're there to do it all for you.
Sure, yeah.
And that is what Bertrand Russell, a lord, he was a British lord,
Yeah.
Hereditary lord too, said, he says, we're creating a world where the people will be unable to decide anything for themselves. They'll simply follow the experts, and that's the world, the utopia they're talking about. That's what they mean by order.
Yeah.
A planned future. Yeah.
We mentioned earlier, regarding the English Revolution. Do you know anything about Guy Fawkes?
Oh, Guy Fawkes. Yeah. Well, Guy Fawkes supposedly was brought in, and many think at the time, because of the chaos that was reigning when James the First of England came in.
Mm-hmm.
He was already the sixth of Scotland, but the first for England. He needed an excuse to get taxpayers' money to build his armies up. He couldn't find them, and it was lucky that Guy Fawkes had been brought in on behalf of some of the Catholics, and it's thought it was an early Jesuit training that he had. And somehow or another, they did catch him red-handed. He planted gunpowder underneath the Parliament building.
Yeah. And
so James became the victor there, and suddenly was a hero, and he got all the tax money that he wanted, etc.
So, do you know if this is related to the huge London fire that was raining in? I think it wasn't it 1666? This was, right?
Yeah, that's right. You always have 360s in major events.
Yeah.
It was interesting too that, see, at that time, Sir Christopher Wren and other architects who were also Rosicrucians, very high-level Rosicrucians, just happened to have a new plan of London all drafted up.
Yeah.
With new buildings. And of course that would have lain idle if they didn't have the fire, so it was very fortunate they had the fire to fulfill their dreams of rebuilding London, an international city.
Yeah, it's an amazing day. It's so obvious. You almost bypass that event sometimes. It feels like. I mean, it's amazing, and again we can, I guess, tie this into the fire worship of Prometheus, and the idea of the sun worship, or the fire that changes society to bring forth this new order. Do you know if there are in other cities and so forth, there are major astronomical alignments going on, and there are city plannings and all of this? Do you know any of that going on in London, the city of London?
I'm sure it will be, because these guys love it. They never change their methods. They always stick to the same methods. And sure enough, I mean, you'll find that the major cities along the eastern U.S. seaboard, if you line them up, the major ones all go in a straight line across the curve of the globe, all the way back to Stonehenge. For instance, that's no coincidence.
Yeah.
They love to. You see, in the ancient times, in ancient Egypt, there were the stellar cults who studied the stars and the movements of stars, and you had the sun ones who watched the solar movements and the moon, etc. And they already had it all mapped. They knew when eclipses would come. They knew that the Earth was round. They knew that the Earth traveled around the sun in ancient times.
Yeah.
And they loved to. What they said in Egyptian writings is that they would bring heaven to earth. They'd amalgamate the two. And so what they did was they would build their big temples and in the shape of the constellations, with the other constellations in alignments with them.
Yeah. And
if you take the constellation Orion, that was the hunter, and every pharaoh was given the title of Orion, or the hunter.
Yeah.
And he was also given the title in the Greek at one point of Adonai or Adonis.
Yeah.
And so they're different names for the same warrior. And the three stars of the belt of Orion became the three pyramids, the Great Pyramids.
Yeah.
And they also built the rest of there's other buildings from the satellite photographs. You'll see the whole of Orion recreated on Earth. And so they've always used the same strategy down through the eons in the secret brotherhoods to bring heaven and earth together by recreating and that was the beginning of the plan for utopia.
Interesting.
So their alignments are very, very essential to them.
Yeah.
And they go along ley lines, etc. We know that the Catholic Church, when it came in to Britain, initially they used to knock down the old temples, and then an order came out from one of the popes, and he says, no, just reconstruct them and change them into pagan, to Christian temples.
Yeah.
And they are all on ley lines. You can actually see the compass, the satellite photographs once again. You'll see how they're all in alignment with each other in Glastonbury and all this kind of stuff. This is common knowledge that came out in the 1800s, big time.
Yeah.
And then now, of course, there's plenty of evidence to support this. The recreation of heaven on earth, but a utopia run by those in the know, the scientists and the brotherhood, to make the perfect system on earth. That's what they mean by that.
Do you think that, you know, they can could there circulate ideas up there that, you know, on these levels, I guess, of these people who actually are in the positions of power to actually build cities and so forth, that, you know, they actually are communicating in some sense with, you know, higher forces, with these kind of messages that, you know, we got the idea or something like that?
Well, they put out a lot of nonsense. See, most of the stuff that comes out about these groups comes from these groups.
Yeah.
And they always give us stuff to mystify us and intrigue us, because it's like many of them have said, even about the Illuminati. The Illuminati said that the best way to get people into the order is to put out mystery and intrigue.
Yeah, sure.
And the young go in, you see, they want to know the secrets. So they put a lot of nonsense out there. We do know that some sects of them have used channeling, we now call channeling, for centuries. In fact, you can go back to the ancient Greeks, where they would use, especially their oracles, their main oracles, they would have women who were essentially drugged, who were supposedly incommunicado with the gods, and she would murmur something in a strange tongue or just a garble, and the priest would interpret it. That was very common in the ancient world. So they've used, and it's generally women they use for channeling. Even Adolf Hitler and a couple of his societies that he had, the Vril Society was one of them.
Yeah.
They used a female channeler, and again, we don't know how much is myth and how much is meant to fascinate us. But they do claim that some of their advanced technology was channeled through this woman for their weaponry.
Interesting. You know, I totally agree. It's a jungle, basically, a mishmash of all of these different ideas, and on one level, as you say, it's very intriguing, very interesting, and also I totally agree. It feels like it is there to kind of mesmerize you and kind of get you into that kind of thinking with that kind of theme. I mean, how do you do you go by heart, or do you study this very meticulously in order to kind of, you know, separate the truth from the lies, basically? Yes,
you can. You can definitely throw a lot of the mystery out the window, because, as I say, they put out about themselves generally, to give themselves almost. It creates awe in the listener to think, oh, they're so powerful and they have this magic, etc.
Yeah.
So you realize, no, they run mainly on science and money, of course, big money.
Yeah.
And secrecy, and they are the only ones on the planet who are directing the course of the future of the planet.
Yeah.
So the lesser groups, the lower orders of Freemasonry, can really believe as they wish. I knew some of the middle members, like Maurice Strong, who was picked up by Rockefeller and has been a UN frontman ever since. I know that he has his personal deity that he meditates with. Now, how much of that is nonsense or is put on a show for the public, once again, we don't know.
Yeah. Very interesting. Yeah, it always also seems to tie back to these, you know, entities that are being channeled or whatever. I mean, we could speak about, of course, Aleister Crowley and his, I Was, where you got the Book of the Law. We could speak about, I guess it was Joseph Smith of the Mormons, who also had some kind of encounter with light beings or something like that.
Yeah.
So
and once again, Joe Smith was a Mason.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, the angel let him translate it all. He gave him the power to translate it from the golden tablets, then took the tablets away so that there's no proof.
Exactly. It's beautiful. Yeah, regarding you mentioned the Nazi, the real society, and I guess also the Thule society. There is this underlying theme that there was some kind of fight between the Nazi branches and them going up against Freemasonry and the fraternities that were in place in Europe throughout that time. Do you know if this is true?
Yeah, this is a standard thing. The Soviets did the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Once they get in power, they abolish all lower orders of Freemasonry because they, of all people, understand how Freemasonry has been used to foment revolution and counter-revolution.
Ah.
So they always abolish the lower orders. However, while they're in power, they keep the higher level to themselves, and they still practice it in the higher level. I mean, if you look at Himmler, Himmler had his own Masonic Knights Templar type temple created and built.
Yeah.
And he went by the old Templar plans with the round temple, or octagonal. I think some of them are octagonal. But so he was heavily involved in this, more so than any of the rest of them.
Yeah.
And we know that Adolf Hitler had his favorite channeler as well. And he also had a guy who did the stars for him, his horoscopes. So he was heavily influenced by all this too. The Soviet regime, it's interesting, in the British newspapers, after they decided to take the walls down, because it was time to move out into society, really, according to the speech by Gorbachev that he gave in the Soviet Union, interesting enough, a 2-page spread was done on the Soviet general staff of the military, and they found that they were all into the same things: channeling, fortune telling, talismans, all the old magic stuff. Yeah.
So I mean, there is this underlying idea, the official version, just as you said there, that the Soviet or the communist socialistic idea was atheistic in that sense, but I think you pointed out in one of your blurbs that again this is very a very religious movement. I guess could we interpret something if we look at the symbols on the old Soviet Union flag? I mean, the hammer and the sickle. What's your take on that?
Well, on the one hand, you've got the hammer, which is more of a Nordic. You see, behind all these movements, you always have a Nordic influence. And so you have the hammer of Thor. And you also have the same hammer in the British societies that H.G. Wells belonged to, the Fabian Society, where you will see on the stained glass windows for the Fabian Society, H.G. Wells and others, the founders, hammering the world with a big hammer. So that was the same as the Soviets, that you would use the hammer, the might.
Yeah.
But they also have the sickle. Now, the sickle is the standard tool that Kronos, Saturn, Kronos is the Greek for the same thing.
Yeah.
He was called the side wielder. He cut the cords between ages, the old and the new, so that the scythe was a symbol of the cutting between the old and the new age. And also just off between the horns of like the moon, it's also the moon, you see, the Nasi in Hebrew, it means the head. And it's also for the new moon, they call that too. The Sanhedrin is called a Nasi, which is quite the coincidence. And between the two horns of the sickle or the moon, you also have a little star there if you look closely.
Yeah, that's
and that again is the star of Lucifer, the light bringer. thing, or Prometheus, same old story.
Yeah.
Highly occultic. Then they had, see, all Masons and military organizations have a square where they march.
Mm.
And that's from Freemasonry, and they call it square bashing in Britain, where you learn to drill and do all your marching. And the Soviets had the red square, and red was the color in Freemasonry for revolution, you see.
Mm. Yeah.
It's quite interesting to see that. If you go to the British police, they wear the checkered one, the black and white squares around their hats.
Yeah.
Because they are Freemasonic societies. They are the fraternity of Freemasonry and all police forces.
Yeah.
So there you have the one on the one side, and then you have the red ones on the other, but they're all part of the same structure.
Yeah.
In fact, the Scottish branch of the military around their hats, they have the red and white squares because that comes from the old Jacobean part of their society, the Jacobean revolution.
Interesting. Yeah.
They'll wear those same ones today because Scots are always put out into the forefront as the shock troops for all the fighting. So they've got a lot in common with the symbology of the Soviet system.
Interesting. Yeah, you mentioned a lot of interesting, terms there, like Jacobinism, and also of course the Fabian Society. Maybe we can go into that also, but there is one term I know that might also connect with the hammer, and this is the idea of beating your swords into plowshares. Have you heard about this?
Yeah, eventually that was always their intention, but only after total dominance of the world is achieved.
Mm-hmm.
To ensure that Joe Public could never have a counter-revolution. That's what they mean by it.
So this is the idea of abolishing all weapons in the world after your structure is in place, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In fact, communism used to say that the definition of their goal was the absence of all opposition. That's when they would achieve their goal.
Yeah.
And they ran with they used all the Masonic free symbols in the Soviet side as well. And Leon Trotsky wrote about it when he was escorted out of Russia.
Yeah.
He was escorted through 2 or 3 different borders by Russian police, or NKVD they were called at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And he said they didn't have to show passports anywhere because his guides gave Masonic flashes as they went past and they were allowed through.
Yeah.
And Trotsky himself, when he died, he was writing a book on Freemasonry. He joined it while in prison.
Mm-hmm.
So they were all Freemasons on all sides.
Yeah.
And what's interesting too, if you look into the United States Congressional Hall, and you'll see all the symbols of the old gods, the mythological gods of Greece, up on the ceiling.
Yeah.
If you go into the Kremlin, you'll see the same thing.
So I mean, this again is this a tie back to? I guess the main idea now is, I guess, that all of this goes back to Greece, this type of deal. But do you think that they up there even tie this back further to Atlantis, as you spoke of earlier, considering the Francis Bacon idea with the new Atlantis and all of that?
Well, on the one hand, we have to remember the whole idea of here's something people don't realize. And it's not too difficult to understand when you grasp the initial parts of it. You're dealing with a system who plans the future always, and always did.
Yeah.
And how clever to write your ending as the beginning of your holy books.
Yeah.
We must remember that there's a lot of hidden allegories in Genesis, for instance, to give you the realization. They're giving you the ending. They're giving you it as the beginning, but it's actually been reversed. Their goal is to recreate Adam and Eve in the one perfection of a deity, which is a hermaphrodite. And of course, if Adam was the perfect image, imago of the deity, it's a perfect sameness. That's what it is in the Greek, perfect sameness. And yet they took the female eventually from Adam. that meant that he had male and female within him.
Yeah.
That's the part of the mystery religion. And what do we find today? The scientists are trying to create hermaphroditic beings for the future, which will be well balanced, will obey, there'll be no quarrels, no male, female anymore as such, and they can just clone more and more of them rather than have births for them.
Yeah.
This is all part of stuff that's been written down by high scientific groups. And now, let's go back again even to the same technique of putting the ending at the beginning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Plato had been, he'd studied in Egypt for years. That's where he got his education.
Yeah.
He then, once he got into the high degrees, he did a circular tour. They still do this today. And he went to what's now called the Holy Land area to be initiated into other degrees. And then he went to India.
Yeah.
So this is the same thing. India has a big player in all of this. Always has been. Very quiet place, but a lot goes on there. And Plato, being a member of the mystery religion, knew this technique of giving you something that happened in the past as a story, but for the initiates, he's telling you what their ultimate goal was going to be by giving you a story as though it happened in the past.
Interesting. Very interesting.
And even the name he gave for the predecessor in his family, he claims, and even that's tongue-in-cheek, we don't know if he was pretending or what, but he said his name was Solon. So Sol is the sun.
Yeah.
And the Greek city, when they went into Egypt and dominated Egypt, the main city was Heliopolis, or On in Egyptian.
Yeah.
So it was the son of On. So there's tongue-in-cheek allegory in a story form for something which is to come.
Yeah, it's a loop of history and mythology all mixed up, I guess, and they can, tie in the knots where they feel necessary to kind of keep the same game going over, millennia, I guess. And
all we have by any other authors on Atlantis is the same little sketchy piece where they mention that the Atlanteans were at war with the Greek colonies, and they were overrunning them, and it was the Spartans who saved them.
Yeah.
They defeated the Atlanteans, and as it was ending, then Atlantis sank.
Yeah.
We don't have any real stories except the ones that were invented in the 1800s by Masons to talk about higher technologies. That's when they put all these books out that had nothing to back them up. But the more they're repeated, the more it seems true, you see.
Yeah.
And because that's all we have on Atlantis. And we do know that if you go into the Mediterranean, the Aegean Sea, you'll find that they've excavated tremendous excavations on the island of Terra, which is part of a ring of islands. And at one time, they were the outer ring of an island that did sink. We know that is true.
Yeah.
We do know that the people who lived there were high merchants. They owned the ancient world's merchant routes. And every room has hand-painted frescoes, ideal location, beautiful temperatures. They were the high-class peoples of their day. We know that the middle of the island sunk. It was a volcano. And they did get off. Most of them did manage to abandon. They had plenty of warning that was happening. And that seems to be where the story of Atlantis really came from.
And if we are to take the mirror loop kind of idea about history and mythology, the destruction of Atlantis obviously again then is going to be mirrored in the destruction of America, if that is the new Atlantis.
That's right.
And in one sense, I don't know if this is the case, if we can tie this in, but since we began to talk about communism and socialism, I guess there is a kind of a current, ongoing invasion from, South America into North America to kind of merge the whole continent and all of that.
Yep.
But wasn't this, this might not have been Karl Marx who wrote this, but wasn't this one of the ideas that was brought forth by Karl Marx to kind of
he wrote that in Das Kapital.
Yeah.
And he said that a world would evolve if they worked hard enough towards it, where they would have a united Europe.
Yeah.
a United Americas and a Far Eastern conglomerate. It's now called the Pacific Rim region.
Yeah.
So this was all worked out by the economists of the day. The big players like John Stuart Mill and others were all heavily involved in the planning of this. The bankers, Rothschilds, were heavily involved in it too. It was foreign policy, in fact, to them. And then they simply, what they do, you see, they have different special groups of high Freemasons.
Yeah.
Just like the monks. See, Freemasonry already existed within certain groups of monks down through the ages. And if you wanted to start your own order of monks, you'd have to get a charter either from the group you were already in or from the Vatican. You know? And so what they did was that you'd have ones who dealt with healing. Now, if you were into the translation of ancient languages, you would start your own up and have a charter to do it. And then that order would specialize in ancient languages. Well, that's the same way it still works today within high Freemasonry.
Yeah. And
so they give you the order called the Royal Institute of International Affairs, and the American branch is called the Council on Foreign Relations. They still don't publish mainly their meetings to the public.
Yeah.
And I've got a videotape where this guy's introducing Brzezinski, and he says that this is one of the few publicly available broadcasts we're giving out. Generally, it says we don't allow the public to hear our meetings.
Yeah.
So here, then you find every politician who's worth his salt is a member. Every high journalist is a member. Every newspaper man's a member.
Yeah.
Every high guy in the military is a member. It's the whole system.
Yeah.
They're part of a secret society that claims it is non-governmental. And they don't play politics, that is true. They make an agenda and they follow that agenda.
Yeah.
They don't play politics. So that's a specialized branch of higher Masonry. We find the same thing as precursor was the group that Cecil Rhodes and Rothschild set up in Britain, which became the Round Table group of Lord Milner, Alfred Milner. That merged with the Cecil Rhodes Society, and they became the Royal Institute of International Affairs, and they were given a British Crown charter to exist, like a license.
Yeah, and they had this...
So in a sense, working for the British government.
Yeah, Rhodes, people who got Rhodes scholarships, right? Like Clinton?
Yes, and now, of course, many politicians and bureaucrats of all countries are Rhodes scholars. They all go to Oxford for their training, get sent back to their own countries, but they're already sworn towards working selflessly towards world government.
Yeah. How would you tie in people like Hugo Chavez in all of this? Any ideas on him?
Well, you almost always have your oppositions, or what appears to be oppositions. The public who are living in the bottom level of the matrix, they can clue in when they see a common enemy, one enemy, that's getting too big for their boots.
Yeah.
So the trick has always been the dialectic. You always give an opposition to the enemy, knowing the public then will take sides. Because in the mystical arts, you always need at least two sides to create conflict, and out of conflict you guide the change.
Yeah.
The synthesis. And that's how this has been done for thousands of years. In ancient times they couched it in more mystical language, and they would say that summer combats winter, spring combats autumn. And so that, because that had to be even more secret from the powers that ruled at that time. Today they're more open about the technique, and probably Marxism came out more openly than any other group by putting this technique down of the eternal struggle, eternal conflict to the ultimate goal.
Yeah.
And you see, once in communism, you start off with your thesis, and that could be your front group causing pressure, knowing that for every act there's an equal and opposite reaction.
Yeah.
So you then create the reaction to it, and you put your men in there for leaders.
Yeah.
And then you have a synthesis, but it doesn't stop there with the synthesis, which is compromise. You've now changed the system to a compromise. Then you take the synthesis and you start that then becomes the new thesis, and then it has its antithesis, and then it becomes a synthesis again. It's to be never ending until they reach their final goal of creating man as God.
Yeah.
Superman, basically.
Yeah.
All going back to Charles Darwin again. And Darwin, all he was doing was vocalizing his Masonic religion, because the Masonic religion had always believed in evolution.
Yeah.
And that with the use of science and understanding nature, they could speed the process up.
We had one question for you, Alan, regarding, and I guess we could tie all of this together again with the current situation in North and South America, or America at large, regarding multiculturalism and how this is kind of being used. Do you think that this ultimately is something damaging, or I mean, is this also one of these things that are being played out to further advance the agenda?
Oh, there's no doubt. Rockefeller gave a speech, and I have the video of it. It was taken internally at one of his meetings with his group of the CFR.
Mm.
And right there, they're talking about this, and he says, it'll be unfortunate, he said. He said, you can't make an omelette without breaking eggs.
Yeah.
And then he said, unfortunately, this generation are the cannon fodder for the plan.
Yeah.
In other words, they know that the chaos that will ensue as people battle to try and retain their cultures, and the animosity and hatred they will build up. But they will use all of that as a reason for coming down hard on everybody into a totally planned, directed society.
Yeah.
But they will use that, so they're intensifying it, in fact. And you actually find that some of the groups that are coming up from Mexico and have been taught to be really radically pure Mexican and Mexico forever,
yeah,
and reclaim their old territories, are being funded by the same Rockefeller foundations and Carnegie and Ford foundations.
Yeah.
To be so. So these foundations, like Adam Weishaupt said, since they have unlimited financing, will control all conflicts by financing all sides.
Yeah. So I mean,
that exactly.
Yeah, and so again, this is to bring in even more control, and I know you wanted to elaborate a little bit further. We spent another show previously talking about the microchip, but again, you have some new stuff on this. I mean, this is being implemented, I guess, as we speak, or what's your?
Well, I'll tell you how it's implemented. At Loyola University, where they've had the world meetings of science, sponsored by the U.S. Department of Commerce, I have all of that material. 600 pages came out of that meeting. And they say they have the chip ready to go. All they have to do is convince the public of the necessity of taking it. And interestingly enough, I was watching a professor at a university in Canada here give a talk on the behavioral sciences, and he's a complete Huxleyan. This guy believes in the writings of Huxley, and he was going on about the techniques of mind control through drugs, through electromagnetic radiation. Now, he didn't mention HARP, but that's what HARP does too.
Yeah.
And how it can pacify people and be used to control whole societies.
Yeah.
As an actual fact, he wasn't surmising this is something to come. He said this is all proven fact. So this stuff is being used on the public today as we go through these big changes.
Yeah. And
they could make the public edgy, nervous, by a simple alteration of the frequency, or they can make us very passive and willing to accept anything if they wish to. So they're using the HARP technology in conjunction with the heavy aerial spraying, which is mainly metallic particles. Because years ago, you probably heard of Nikola Tesla.
Sure.
Well, there's an awful lot of rubbish put out about Nikola Tesla as being some sort of happy genius that wanted to benefit mankind. Tesla worked till the day he died, trying to perfect energy plasma weapons that could wipe out whole cities. He worked mainly for the military.
Yeah.
And he did come up with the standing wave technology. It's now called HARP.
Mm.
And the problem was that they couldn't use it effectively at very, very long ranges, only in immediate vicinities. Now, of course, they can bounce it off the ionosphere. However, it was the inventor of the hydrogen bomb in the 50s, I think it was Hellier, who came up with the idea of how to get around that, to use HARP more effectively on whole continents or even the whole world. And he came up with the idea of heavily lacing the atmosphere from aircraft with metallic particles, which would make the atmosphere like a heavy circuit. And they could then use the HARP technology to cover vast distances and regions,
Yeah.
and influence the moods of the people. Well, they're actually doing it. We're going through it.
Huh.
It's being done. Yeah.
And it's right out in the open with this latest news that you mentioned here.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, when will people wake up and realize what's going on? I mean, again, is it lost? I mean, if they're implementing this stuff, I mean, this is contributing to the fact that people don't have the strength, time, or energy to actually look at this stuff.
Yes, that's the problem. Plus, they've had the generation now that's around 20 to 25 have been more inoculated at an earlier age, even with more inoculations than any other group.
Mm.
And we know the effects of the mercury and all the rest of the stuff they inject. Well, everyone's got immune system problems. Everybody today has it normally.
Yeah.
That's the new normal, and it's because they were attacking our immune systems, not helping them. Because you read the writings of the guy who invented the polio vaccine, Dr. Salk,
Mm-hmm.
and we all think he's such a wonderful hero. And I went into his history and found that he was one of the main spokesmen for the American Eugenics Society, who wanted to drastically reduce the world's population. That's in the history books.
Yeah.
And he comes out as your savior, supposedly. And then since then our IQ level drops.
Mm.
And we all have autoimmune problems. Now, this was part of the agenda. I hate to say it, but it's true. And so I think those who still retain memory and their intellect, we're the last ones that can speak out to alter the direction of this, because the up-and-coming group have been too heavily hit.
Yeah.
And if you look at the writings of Arthur Koestler, Koestler,
Mm.
he worked at the United Nations in think tanks and laboratories, finding ways to chemically lobotomize the public for a world of peace. And I realized, my God, they've been doing it.
Yeah, yeah. And again,
They've actually been doing it. You know, the World Health Organization,
Mm.
as part of the United Nations, in the 50s, they openly came out, and this is in the old newspapers and old books at the time, the World Health Organization, which I call Doctor Who, WHO,
Yeah.
they came out and advocated heavily lacing all the water supplies in Lebanon
Yeah.
to bring down the aggression of the people.
Amazing.
Great benefactor of the United Nations.
Yeah. And it feels like it is to also get people, on this totally dependent on taking drugs to, actually live a decent normal life at this point, I guess.
Well, Aldous Huxley was the main spokesman. Now, here's something for you. The public broadcasting service here
Mm.
are running a 3-part special on a promo of a series for television on the year, I think it's 2020 or something, or 2025.
Mm-hmm.
Run on fictional forms, but according to how society is going. And they all have brain chips. Everyone on the planet in the series has brain chips.
Oh, wonderful.
and they take you through a guided tour of the future with a hologram of Aldous Huxley of Brave New World.
Wait, I think I saw a piece of this. Is it like the guided tour with little children walking around?
That's right.
And yeah, I saw this. Yeah, I saw.
And if you don't take your chip, they call you a Luddite. So you're fixed in time. You're a caveman.
Oh my
and
God.
This is called predictive programming.
Yeah.
Of making us think this is inevitable, and we'll just have to go along with it.
Yeah, exactly. Because if this is the expected future, again, if young people are so conditioned into that, it will be, nothing strange at all with that kind of behavior. That's how we work basically as humans.
Sure.
I mean,
but what they're not telling you is we've never lived in a perfect society. We've never lived in a society where you do not have a dominant minority who run things.
Yeah.
Why would they give you access to a freedom? And of course, they're not going to give you access to a freedom. Once everyone's chipped, yeah, they might give you the occasional virtual reality movie in your head for a little while, but eventually they'll pull the main switch, and then the real purpose will kick in, and then they will have their utopia.
Yeah.
When we're all robots. That's what their goal is.
Yeah.
History is a course through hell for people. And we haven't suddenly become civilized.
Yeah. I mean, there's also, in one sense, if we are to look at it from another perspective, this is incredibly rich learning process in the sense that we, get to know our dark sides very well during this process we're going through here.
We're all being conditioned. The youngsters, as I said at that Loyola meeting, they promote this through movies and cartoons, and the youngsters would want to be like their superheroes, and they'll tell them they'll get tremendous powers and how exciting it will be.
Yeah.
And now they've got movies out there already and cartoons for children with that very thing, where their heroes have microchips in their brains.
Sure.
So it's conditioning the public to go along with this. However, for the adult population, they need strife. They need to get all the different races fighting each other, the chaos going, the mass movements of peoples all over the world, and the chaos that will ensue. So they can point out and say, hey, you can't go on like this. We've got to get order. We've got to have peace and safety, and we have the plans right here to do so.
Yeah. Do you think that this...
First you create the problem, then offer the solution.
Yeah. Do you think that this could be basically, be erupting at any point here, or do is there some kind of, big steps or big events that they have to, get to before they actually, implement the full chaos?
The problem is they have so many facets of the secret services in every country, which are all tied together at the top already, always have been. And especially since the signing of the United Nations Charter and the NATO Charter, the CIA, the Mossad, MI6, and every other group is tied together in compartments at the top. And they have special groups that can create any kind of chaos and blame anybody.
Yeah.
So it's all in there. They have unlimited financing. They have experts to do the demolition jobs or whatever they choose. We already have exposés from Porton Downs warfare laboratories in Britain, where they've developed some of the most highly contagious forms of diseases, generally. They can take their pick because they have it all.
I mean, one thing we could, if we're not fighting against, mind control clones who are performing this kind of stuff, I guess one of our goals to actually do something about this then would be to wake up the people who actually are implementing these kinds of things, who are within these structures and these power, these organizations, as you mentioned.
Yes, you'd have to. The problem is, I watched a program a few years ago on the American nuclear submarines that were based in Scotland, in the Holy Loch, and the commander of the base was asked how they picked the actual men who were trained just to work the keys and the programs for the release of the bombs, knowing it was the end of everything.
Yeah.
And he said quite matter-of-factly, he says, we have a special psychology test we give candidates for this particular job, and what we're looking for are psychopathic personalities.
Oh my God.
And that's what they've been doing with the scientists that work on this kind of stuff. And
yeah.
It's the same test they give them. They want psychopathic personalities who live on ego. They have no feelings for other people, and they're obedient only to their paymaster.
Listen, Alan, we're totally out of time in this segment. We have to keep the format here, but to end things, tell people about your website and some of you have some DVDs and books available.
Yes, they have to go into cuttingthroughthematrix.com and download whatever they want for free. There's lots there, lots of topics, and there's also some DVDs and MP3s for sale there, and books as well. That keeps me going. So yeah, look in there and check for updates, because it gets updated pretty frequently.
Yeah, check it out, cuttingthroughthematrix.com. We are totally out of time, but we're going to continue with Alan in our subscriber section, so we'll take a short break and be right back. Alan and I will continue in our subscriber section now, and we'll dive right into talking about the Priory of Sion, Plantard, the Knights Templar and the Grail Hunters. And this leads us into some fascinating areas about the latest DNA research, the Human Genome, or is it Genome Project. We also talk about the elimination or the exclusion of the feminine, and the creation of life and the strife for eternal life. We also get into the recent news about the unearthing of the 1918 Spanish flu by Canadian scientists. So I hope you join us in the subscriber section for much more interesting stuff. If you're not a subscriber, I hope you consider signing up with us. You'll get full access to our growing archive, and at the same time you help keep this radio show and the website going. Thank you so much for listening to the show, and thanks to Henrik behind the controls. We will be back this Thursday, diving into the creative cosmos with our good friend and regular Christopher Morse. So lots of good stuff coming up. In the meantime, stay tuned to redicecreations.com. Take care, and we will talk soon. This is Henrik Palmgren signing off.
Welcome. This is Red Eyes Radio.
By adopting the same sort of beliefs as religions run on, there was the inevitability of what they call progress, and the rising of new forms, new ways of living from the lower classes' struggle, supposedly. And as the decadence into the middle and upper classes, then you'd always have this fresh input for a new direction coming from the workers, which was nice on paper but never happened in reality. So it was a pseudo-science which tied in heavily with the writings of Charles Darwin. It was based on the Superman-type theory that through science, through the abandonment of all religions and simply using science, man would somehow fulfill a destiny, which shows you that there was a religious pull to the whole preaching of communism, that there was a destiny there to even fulfill. And that's when they wrote many books. You'll find that all the Freemasonic groups of the day were heavily involved in the revolutions, which predated Karl Marx. You can go back to the English Revolution. That was the first major turn where bankers financed Cromwell to take over England and get what they call democracy on the go established. Second revolution was the American Revolution, and then of course that was followed by the French Revolution. So Freemasonic literature, even today, openly declares that they have been behind every revolution for the last 500 years.
Regarding Cromwell, what time period are we talking about there?
You're looking into the 1600s.
Okay,
And
Promethean character, isn't this right? This, of course, is a statue that is, I guess, outside of the Rockefeller Plaza, or what is it, in New York there, where this is basically the god who stole the fire from the other gods, right?
That's right, fire from heaven.
Yeah.
Meaning intellect. And there's a good poem out there by Shelley on Prometheus, is well done. And Prometheus, again, in the later religions, became Satan. It's the same hidden meaning behind all the religions. In fact, they're all the same story.
Mm-hmm.
So Prometheus took light, intellect, to the world of darkness and gave it to man. Yeah.
So he's the rebel who defines the overlord, I guess.
Yes.
Yeah. and again the revolutionary idea then is to kind of always rebel against the authority, to kind of, I guess that they see it in the way that they're trying to, rearrange the current paradigm by actually having people rebel or go in revolution, I guess.
Yes.
Yeah.
The whole idea of the mystery religions is to bring order out of chaos.
Yeah.
And they perceive a world where everyone does their own thing as chaos, as chaotic. They want a world run by science, where science dictates to the people, and the people follow and do what they're told.
Yeah.
But this has been like that for at least 500 years. And we see it today where on all television programs across the globe, even on regular little newscasts, they always bring experts on to tell you what to do about this, that, or the other.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to think for yourself. Well, was financed by bankers from Amsterdam,
yeah,
who financed his army, the equipment, the armaments, and all of that kind of stuff to change England's system from the feudal society to the next step, which was a form of democracy, even though initially it was all for nobility, really. They swapped their feudal system and gave themselves a parliament, you might say.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I guess we could tie this into, I guess, William of Orange and the bank system coming out of the Netherlands, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was heavily involved. And as I say, to be on the go much earlier, you'll find that with even the writings of More with his Utopia. He wrote Utopia about the same time, or just before Francis Bacon wrote his New Atlantis.
Yeah.
They're very, very similar because they were both Freemasonic writings or Rosicrucian writings. And they talked about a future world where everything would be in its place and everything would have its place, run on a form of science, with lawyers at the top as well, administering the justice to the people. But basically science would lead the way out of the darkness of religion.
Yeah.
So from the 1500s onwards, you might say, you can see the start of this. And by New Atlantis, they meant the Americas.
Yeah.
That's what they meant by the New Atlantis.
That's an interesting idea. I want to return to that a little bit later also maybe, but regarding the, I guess, revolutionary movements, one theme I guess is running throughout all of this is the tie-in with the Creations Radio. My name is Henrik Palmgren and this is Internet Talk Radio, recorded from the west coast of Sweden. You'll find us online at redicecreations.com, where we have a new show for you every Thursday and Sunday, and our entire archive of regular shows is up there for free. And if you like the show, we have a lot more programs available for you in the subscriber section, so take a look at that. Thanks to Kent Daniel Bentkowski, who was with us last week talking about Stanley Kubrick's Eyes Wide Shut. Very good stuff, and for our subscribers we dived deeper into the global elite. We also talked about the TV series 24 and about nukes going off in the US and much more. So check that out if you missed it. Today we have Alan Watt back with us for his monthly visit, and we'll begin to talk about the origins of socialism and communism, and we'll get into the occult aspects of this apparently atheistic political ideology. What is behind the hammer, the sickle and the star? Stay tuned, lots of good stuff coming up with Alan Watt.
Who are we?
Welcome. Today we have researcher Alan Watt back with us on the line. Alan joins us the last Sunday of each month here on Red Ice Creations Radio, and we are very proud to have Alan with us. His website is cuttingthroughthematrix.com, where you can follow along with Alan's blurbs and very powerful audio commentary, and I suggest you do check out some of his books, his videos that he got available through his site. Alan is very knowledgeable about history, mythology, fraternal orders, secret societies, and all kinds of movements directing and guiding our world today. So again, with that, let me say welcome back to you, Alan, and thank you so much for taking the time to be here today.
It's a pleasure, yeah.
It's awesome to have you. I thought we could dive in today to kick things off, talking a little bit about socialism and communism. I heard one of your blurbs where you kind of went into a little bit about the symbology behind the Soviet flag and all of this, and maybe we can dive into that a little bit later on. But to get things going, I guess we could start at the official beginning to kind of unravel some of the knots that there. Do you think that Karl Marx, Friedrich Engels, are these guys the real founders of communism?
No. We know that Karl Marx was a hack journalist who was kicked out of Germany and brought into Britain to basically write the manifesto. He was so unimportant that for many years his name wasn't even attached to the first couple of editions. So he wasn't the main thrust. He was the person who was told what to put into writing, into a formula really, and a theory, the whole theory of dialectical materialism, and to make it into what seemed to be a science, and that was what it was meant to